In this video, we are going to start with a new module, and this module is going to be about writing files in Python, or let us say file handling in Python. So, file handling in Python is a very important topic. So far, we have learned about different types of collections in Python, and before that, we looked at different data types, and then we looked at conditional statements, and after that, we talked about functions. But so far, whatever work we have done, we have dealt with data and we have worked with data in our Python session. And the moment the session is closed, everything that we create, all the logic that we write, or any kind of data that we are working with, that is lost. So it is very important for us to have some kind of a system where we can persist any information that we are working with, and it is also important for us to read data from some external sources. So if you must have noticed, any examples that we do, I create some examples or I copy paste something in the Python environment, and then we are working with it. But actually, in real life scenarios, we will have to be working with data from some external sources, like some text files or some JSON files, or maybe from a SQL database, or from some Excel files, or even some kind of audios, videos, or images. So how do we read those files, or how do we create those files? Also, anything that we work with, how can we store them so that we can read them later, or we can share it with someone else? So all of this is going to be covered in file handling, and given the description that I've given, I am assuming that you are very convinced that this is going to be a very important topic, and also because you are going to be using this every day. Okay, we are always going to be reading something from external source, or connecting to some other database, or reading a audio file, video file, image file, or maybe reading a PDF. And then we are going to be working with it. Even as a data scientist, you are going to be working with data, creating graphs, right, creating insights, creating analysis, and then you are going to be saving it, you're going to be storing it. So how all of this is managed is what we are going to see in this module. So let us get started. So before we begin, let us set a little bit of context on what we are going to do. So in Python, when we talk about file handling, majorly we are going to be working with two different kinds of files. One is the text data. And text data is pretty intuitive because we usually work with text data. We write something like in a Google Doc, or in a Microsoft Word, or in any kind of notebook software. We write something and we store those things as a string. Like you can write a name, or you can write some information, or you can create a list of things that you want to do, and we save them as text files. And majorly we are going to be working with text files. But at the same time, there is also another format of data, for example images, or audio, or video, or maybe a PDF file. So all of these files, they are not exactly text files, and they cannot be read as a text file, and they are in Python, they are treated as binary objects. And I think when we were talking about strings earlier, I told you a little bit about Unicode decode. So what happens in text data, whatever we store actually gets encoded, and when we are reading it back, it gets decoded. Whereas in binary case, we are just reading the information the way it is stored in raw format. So we'll take examples of both. Let us first start with text data and see what are the things we can do with text data. After that, you will have a little bit of context, and then we will move to binary data handling. So the first thing is, let us try to write a file in Python and see what happens. Okay, suppose for example, let me just take a name and let me say Ramesh, and I want to create a file, or I want to create a text file that will contain the name Ramesh. So in Python, there are two ways to read or write files, and we'll look at both the methods. So the first method that we are going to see is using open function, and the second method is going to be we are going to call it using a context manager, using a context manager, which is with statement, using with statement. So first, let us try to read and write a file using open, and then we will try it out with context manager. And first we'll look at text, and then we will look at binary. So the problem statement is that I have a name which is Ramesh, and I want to create a text file which has this name, or I want to store this name maybe somewhere. Okay, so I'm going to use the function open. Okay, and I'm going to say name of a any I can name the file. So I can say let me call it sample.txt. I'm calling it sample.txt. Now this file does not exist. By the way, if you want to know where actually we are, you can write pwd, which means present working directory, and you will know that I am here in this folder. And you can also go back here and you can see I am in this folder actually. Okay, so in this folder you see only notebooks. There are no text files. So let us now come here and just say open sample.txt. What this is going to do is that if there is a sample.txt, it is going to open that file. Otherwise, it will create a file. So right now I don't have any sample.txt in my directory. So it is going to create this, and then I'm going to say comma, and I'm going to say w. Okay, so w here stands for write. So whenever we open a file, while opening the file, we need to specify what is our intention or what are we going to do with that file. So here we are going to write something to the file. So I'm saying w here. So if you come here and if you see, if you go inside this function and press shift tab 2 times, you will see a description of this function. So it says file. So I'm giving the file sample.txt. Then there is something called as mode. So mode, there are different modes. By default, the mode is R, but R stands for read. We'll look at read in some time. Right now we want to write, so we are writing W. For now, you can ignore these things, and you see this says this is the function that we are going to call. And let us just take a quick look at the docstring. It says open a file and return a stream, and it will raise a OS error upon failure. This part you can ignore for now. And the file is either a text or byte string giving the name and of the file to be opened. Okay, so you can read about this, but it is better that we explore this using an example. So I'm saying open sample.txt in write mode, and let me just call it f, or you can call it file. So this is the file, and now what do we want to do with this file? We want to write something in the file. So I'm going to say file dot write, and I'm going to say name. Okay, so if I do this, it says 4 here. Okay, sorry, I made a mistake. It should not be named like this. It should be named like this. You can see it says 6. So you can ignore this 6. Basically, it is saying that it has written 6 characters because Ramesh has 6 characters. This is not very important. But what is important is that if we come back to my home directory, and you will see I have a sample.txt file that has been created here. Now, if I click on this file, you can see something is written here. Name, I don't know why name is written. Name is Ramesh. Let me write one more time. See, okay, I had to refresh it. So it says Ramesh. So I have written Ramesh here. Let me change this and let me write something else. And instead of Ramesh, let me write Suresh. Okay. So if I come back here and if I refresh it, you can see it says Suresh. So two things you might have noticed. One is that whatever I had written earlier, that got overwritten. So I may not want that. I might want to write something after Ramesh, or I might want to overwrite it. So in case if you want to overwrite it, then we can just follow the process that I have shown you. Just use W, and W will open the file and it is going to write something to the file. So let me write something more. Let me say a message, and let me say hello, how are you? And then I'm going to say file is equal to open, and I'm going to say message dot text, and I'm going to open it using write mode, and then I'm going to say file dot write, and I'm going to say message. If I run this, it says 18 here. That you can ignore, but if we come here, you can see there is a text file. So if we come here, you can see that there is a message.txt file that has been created, and if I open this message.txt file, it says hello, how are you? So now we have seen how we can take a string and we can write it in a file. Now, by the way, this file is actually existing in your hard disk, and you can open it using Word or Google Doc or Notebook or any software that you have. Now we have written this file. Now let us see if we have a case where we want to not overwrite something but add something to that is already written. Say for example, I have this message.txt file. I want to open this file and I want to write something after this. Like hello, how are you? I want to, in the next line, I want to say I am fine. So how can we do that? So if I use W here, which says which means write, it is always going to overwrite the content that is already there. So we will use a different mode. Let me take this here and come here and let me change the message to saying that I am fine, thank you. Okay, so this is my message, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to again open the file message.txt, and then I'm going to say file.write message. By the way, one important thing I skipped is that when you open a file, what happens is the file is actually stored in your hard disk. So for temporarily for reading, writing, or whatever purpose you have in mind, for that purpose the Python program loads the file from the hard disk and stores it in the RAM. And right now when I'm opening it, the file is in open position and the file is still in the memory, and I'm writing something. So it is also my responsibility that if I have opened the file, I also need to close the file once my work is completed. So what I'm going to do here is once my work is done, I'm going to write file.close. So now actually the file is closed. If I try to write something now, because the file is closed, it is going to give me an error that IO operation on a closed file, which means I opened a file, I wrote something, then I have closed the file. Now I cannot write anything. If I want to write something, I need to open the file again. Okay, so let me just go back here and see whether my message.txt is fine. Yeah, this text file is fine. Now I want to add something to this file. So I've created a new message which says I am fine, thank you. And again, I'm opening the file, and again, I'm writing the message, and again, I'm going to close the file. Okay, so let me do this. And if I go back here, okay, so sorry, my mistake. I think it would have overwritten. So I forgot to change the mode. Let me come back here, and you see, hello, how are you? And now if I want to reply this on the next line, then what I'm going to do is, instead of W, I'm going to use a different mode, which is A. So A here stands for append, which means whatever text is already there, it is going to append to that text and not overwrite anything. So if I run this now, and if I come back here, you will see after hello, how are you, I will have the next part of the message, which says I am fine, thank you. And we can also have a new line here in case we want it in the next line. So I can write this, and now if I go here, you will see, if I refresh it, you will see it says I am fine, thank you in the new line. So I hope you have understood how do we write a file uh, in a way that it overwrites, and how do we write a file in a way that it actually appends to the existing document. Okay, so now let us look at how do we read this file. I have written a file. Now I want to read what is the content of the file. So how do we do that? The process is very similar. I'm going to take the same code here, and I'm going to say, let me add a heading, reading the contents of a file. And here let me writing something to a file. And also always keep in mind that whenever we are writing something, it is always a string. Okay, so it is always a string. We are not writing any list, we are not writing any dictionary, tuple, set, or any function. We are only writing a string. After some time we will see how do we write any other type of data structure in Python. So I want to read the content of the file. So I have a message.txt, and I want to read the file. So let me just write the code from beginning. I'm going to say file is equal to open. Again, I'm going to open the file. Which file? I'm going to open the message.txt, and this time I'm going to give the mode as R. So R means read. R means read, and I want to read the contents of the file. So I've said I am saying open message.txt read mode. Then I'm going to say file.read. Okay, and let us see what happens. If I do this, then you see I'm able to read all the contents of the file here. Let me open the file again. Let me once I've done this, let me close the file, and you see it's a little bit painful process. Every time we have to open and we have to close. So we'll solve this problem in a while, but for now just bear with me. Okay, so here I'm going to again open here, and I'm going to say I'm fine, thank you, and then I'm going to add a message, where are you coming from? And if I write this, if I go back to my text, it says where are you coming from. Let me always add a message. Okay, so maybe when I write here, okay, we can have a new line after all my messages, and then I can add one more line here to say I'm coming from Delhi. Okay, I forgot to add the new line anyway. So if I come back here, and if I see, you will see it says hello, how are you? I am fine, thank you. I am fine, thank you. Two times I have written that, and then where are you coming from? I am coming from Delhi. So this is the entire content of message.txt. Now I want to read this entire thing. So if I want to read the entire thing, I'll come back to my code, and I'll say file.read, and maybe I can store it in info, and once I close the file, I can just print info. Okay, so whatever I have written, the entire content of the file, I'm able to read. I hope all of you understood how do we read a file and how do we write a file. When we are writing a file, there are two ways, and then we can simply read the file. Reading a file also has multiple methods, but the basic one that we usually use is read. So here, just for your information, I have pasted all the different common modes that are used in file handling. So there is R, which is read mode, W, which is write mode, and it will create a new file if it does not exist. And then there is a append mode, which will add content to the end. And then there is a R plus, and there is a B mode. So R plus and B we'll see later. But let us first solidify whatever we have learned so far. So just to have you convinced that the files that we are writing and reading are just the normal files that we use in our day-to-day life. Here I have created a Microsoft doc file, and in this doc file I have some content on why Python is awesome, and I have some 10 points here. And I want to just save this file, and then I want to read this file in Python, and maybe I will add one extra bullet point here and see if we are able to append something to a file that we would normally use. So I'm going to take this file and I'm going to save this file to this folder. This is the folder in which we are currently working, and I'm going to save it as a text file. You have to save it as a text file because if you save it as a doc file, then you may not be able to read it directly. There will be some other steps in between. So we are avoiding that right now. I'm just going to save it as a normal text file so that it gets encoded in the way that we are going to expect it. So I'm going to say awesomepython.txt. I've named the file as awesomepython, and let me save this file. Okay. And it says that pictures and objects will be lost because it is a text file. So I think I'm going to agree with it, and I'm going to say okay, fine. Like I said, any type of string that we are saving from Python, it has to be encoded in a certain way, which is a Unicode encoding has to happen. There are many types of encoding, but usually there's a Unicode encoding that happens. And when we are reading it, again, that Unicode encoding, decoding happens, and then we are able to see that string. So when we are saving something as a text file, if it has some, like there is some emoji here or something like that. So because of that, it was giving me a warning. And once I have saved the file, if I come back and if I go to my Explorer here and if I see, here I will have a awesome python.txt. While saving, just you have to make sure that it is encoded. If you're getting some warning, make sure you select UTF-8 because that's the most common type of format in which we are supposed to save the files. Anyway, here we have this text file, and if we open this, you see we have the content here. Okay, and you see the some of the formatting has gone, like bold and other things. Here, if you see, we had some bold content, all of that is gone. It is a normal text file. So now let us try to read it, and we'll try to read it in two different ways. One is by using dot read, which will give me the entire content, and I also want to read it step by step, or maybe I want to start reading from the fourth point. Okay, or maybe I want to read the first two lines and then I want to go and read the sixth and seventh line, and then I want to read the 10th line. So all of these things we are going to see now. So let me just say open, I'll say awesome python.text, and I'm going to open it in read mode, and I'm going to call it file, and then I'm going to say file.read. Okay, and I'm going to say call this as info, and then I'm going to say info. Okay, and it is important to close the file also, because if you don't close the file, sometimes you might get some weird errors. And actually it is a good idea to close it, because if you don't close it, the file is still open and eventually it will be closed by Python. There is a concept of garbage collector, and the garbage collector comes and it will clean any kind of garbage, like any kind of open file which has not been closed. But as a responsible programmer, it is your responsibility to close the file. I understand that it is a little painful, and we will not be using this notation. Usually we will be using the other method, but as long as we are using this, we have to use this file.close method. So we have read the file, and once after we have read it, we are storing it in this info variable, and then we are closing it, and then we are going to look at this info variable. So now if you come here and if you see here we have the entire information that we wanted, and if you print this, then you can see that we have read all the information that we had in the text file. Right now I want to add something to it. So we can add also. Okay, before we add, let us see how we can read it line by line. So I think all of you are familiar with using this dir method. Whenever we have an object in Python, if we do this dir method, it tells us what are the possible things that we can do with that object. So if I do this print, you will see here we have so many different methods. Okay, if we look this many, we have so many different methods. Let me take this and let me put it here. So we have buffer, close. So close we have seen. We have detach, encoding, errors, file number, and line buffering mode. Okay, and name, new lines. Read is something we have seen. We are going to see read line. We are not going to explore all these things, but we will definitely look at read line, and then read lines, and we'll talk about seek and tell. These are some of the things we'll see. Write, I've shown you already, and write lines also is similar to read line. So let us try to explore these methods of working with a file. So first let me talk about read lines. Okay, so I'll say file. We already have this file. I think I will have to read it again. Okay, let me come here because I closed the file. So Now I'm going to just do read lines. Okay, and now you see what happens if I do this. It is returning me a list. Okay, it is returning me a list where every element is each item in the list. Every element is each item in the list. So if I do info.1, info of 0, it gives me the first line, then it gives me the second line, then it gives me the third line, like this. So line by line, if you want to read, you can use the read lines function. Now let us try to see what is the read line. Okay, we have seen read and read lines. Let us see what is a read line. Let us come here and let us see. Let us put read line, and it is giving me just the first line. Okay, and if I don't close the file, okay, and if I then print, see, read line, it is giving me the first line, and if I run it again, see what happens. If I just take this file dot read line here, okay, the issue is because I'm opening the file again and again. So let me just open the file once to understand what happens when we do read line. So I have opened the file. Now I'm coming to a different cell to avoid opening the file again, and I'm saying read line. Okay, so if I do read line, it is giving me the first line. Okay, and if I run it again, it remembers till where it has read, and when I run it again, it will give me the next line. See, it is giving me the first line, and if I run it again, it will give me the second line, and if I run it again, it will give me the third line. So one by one, it is returning me all the lines. If I just go back here and if I just say read lines, it is going to give me everything after. So we have read till third point, so from fourth onwards, everything it is giving me in a list format. So when you do read lines, it will read all the lines and it will return all the lines in the form of a list. If you do read line, then it will give you one line at a time. So every time you run, it will give you one line at a time. So here what I want to highlight one more time is that when we do read line, it is giving me the information one line at a time. And once we have read till the third line, after that if I did the read lines, it did not give me all the information. It gave me information only after the point up till which we had already read. So we had read till the third bullet point. So here it is giving me from fourth bullet point onwards, which means that behind the scenes, the file is keeping track of till what point we have read. So there is a pointer or there is a cursor that moves and it keeps track of till what point we have read. So let us highlight this a little bit more because this will have some applications even later when we are trying to read huge files. And that is where these two functions will come into picture, which is seek and tell. Okay. So before we see that, let us try to understand this a little bit. So I'm going to take this here, okay, and let me come here and say, instead of read lines, I'm just going to say read. Okay, and let me just open the file here and just let me open it and let me remove this close and let me just print info. Okay, so here you see, if I do read, it is going to read everything we have seen, but instead of that, I'm just going to give here 10. Okay, see what happens. It says why Python. Okay, not even Python. The first 10 characters it is printing. Okay, it is printing the first 10 characters, and then if I do again, you see it is reading 10 characters after that. So it is keeping track of till what point it has read, and if I keep doing this 10 character at a time, I'm able to read. Okay, I'm reading 10 characters at a time. Or what you can do is you can probably make it 16. Then you can see that it is reading 16 characters at a time. You can count it. So there is an inbuilt cursor or there is an inbuilt pointer there. Now can we control this pointer is the question. Yes, we can control the pointer, and we can also see where the pointer is at any given point of time. Okay, so let me read the file again. So the cursor goes back to the starting or the 0th position, and let me say that I want to read 10 characters, and then I say file dot tell. Okay, and then I'm going to print this. Okay, so what it is going to say, it is going to say 10. Once we have read 10 characters, which means 0 to 9, the cursor will be at the 10th position. So file dot tell will actually give me 10, which will tell me where is the cursor currently. Okay, see, it gives me 12. Okay, I think the first few bytes there is something extra there. uh, okay, let me do this. I think the first 2 bytes are something else, that's why it is giving me problem. If I do file dot read, You'll see first few bytes are something, some extra, I think, because of some encoding, some issue has come. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just read the first two characters and see what happens. Okay. See, there's nothing there actually. There's something wrong. So if I do first 10 characters, okay, I will have to read it again. Okay. If I come here and if I say, see, it gives 12, and after that it is going to move 10 characters ahead. Okay. So from 12 it is going to go to 22. Okay. And from 22 it is going to go to 32. Initial part, there is some issue, which is probably because of this file is having some red dot or something. Because of that it is causing problem. Let me remove that manually and come back here. And now if I do 10, it should give me 10. Let me read the file again one more time. Okay. And if I read this, okay, that extra, you saw some extra point, some extra thing was there, which is gone now. Fine. So let me read the file again. And now if I do this, you'll see file dot tell, or let me say current position, current position of pointer. So I'll read the first 10 characters and the current position will be at the 10th point, and it says 10th point. If I read again, it will move to the 20th point, and then it will move to the 30th point. So this pointer actually is the starting location of where we are actually reading. So by default it is at 0, and the number of characters you read, it will keep shifting, and the moment you read one more time, it will start reading from where it left the previous read. Okay. So now the tell is actually telling us where is the current position of the pointer. Now what is seek? We discussed something, we saw that there is something called as seek. So seek actually is going to move the pointer wherever we want. Okay. So suppose for example we say, let me read the file. Here I'm reading the file, and by default when we do file dot read, it is starting from the 0th position. So let me do file dot read. Sorry, I was supposed to do file dot read just maybe 15 characters. And now if I do file dot tell, it will be at the 15th position, because 0 to 15 it has read. Now it is at 16th position. So 16th position index is 15. So I'm at the 15th position. But now I don't want to read from the 15th position. I want to read from 25th position. So what I can do, I can do file dot seek. I can say 25. Okay. And now if I do file dot tell, my cursor should have moved to 25. And now again if I do file dot read 15, okay, you see why Python is a, this much is first 15 characters, and then it did not print awesome, which was the continuation. It left 10 characters and then it started with easy as pie. So we are able to shift the cursor wherever we want. Just like when you watch a video in a movie player or on Netflix, you can shift the progress bar to whatever point you want to watch the video from. So you watch the first 10 videos and then you can skip to the 20th minute and then you can watch the movie. So you can skip, or you can come back, or you can go back. Okay. So this is something like that. When you are reading a file, you can move the progress bar left or right, and accordingly you will read the file from where you want. So if I reset, I'll just give you one more example. If I take this and if I say file dot read 10, and then if I do file dot seek 0. Okay. So now every time I read 10 characters and my cursor is at 10th position, if I read it again, it is supposed to start from the 10th character, but I am taking it back to 0. So it will read 10 characters, again go back to 0, again read 10 characters, go back to 0. So it will constantly keep reading the first 10 characters, and that is what will happen. Let us see. It is reading, I'll have to print this, sorry. Okay. So it read the first 10 characters, and then if I run it again it is reading the first 10 characters, and then again it is reading the first 10 characters, because I'm sending the cursor back to the origin every time I read it. So I hope tell and seek and read lines and read line, all of these methods on a file are now clear to you. And I have shown you write. Now I'm leaving it up to you to explore what is write lines, and what is write I've shown you. Try what is write lines, and remaining things just leave it for now, we will discuss it later. But try to explore what is write and write lines. So write lines will be when you are passing a list. Okay, let me just show you. Say for example, if I'm having a list where I'm saying hello, and I'm saying how are you, and then I'm saying I am good. Okay, so if I'm giving it as a list, list of, then I'm saying open, and I'm creating a new file. I'm saying new file, and I'm opening it in write mode, and I can just do a dot read here, or you can, what I've shown you is you can do a file, and then you can do a file dot write this way, or in shortcut you can ignore this, and you can just take this open, and you can do a dot write lines, and you can pass list of info. And if you run this, and if you come back here, and I will have a new file here, and you will see this new file, all the content that was there in the list has been added in the text file. So if you have information in a list line wise, then you can use write lines. And if you have some content, if you do read lines, it will be written, it will be read line by line. So here what you can do, you can add a new line after every content, after every element of the list. And if you run this, and if you come here, and if you run this, you see one after the other in a new line content has been written. So these are some of the basics of file handling. So here there are few more methods that I did not cover because they are not that important, and for in the interest of time we can skip them over. But I'll just give you a quick understanding of some of these. For example, buffer actually gives you information about the buffer that is on which it is working. Buffer actually you can understand as when we are reading a file, it is stored in the RAM, and the operations are happening in that intermediate stage. So it is like kind of storing the information in the buffer, and from the buffer it is reading. So if you want to see what is actually the buffer object, you can use a dot buffer. But for now you don't have to get into too much of detail of how this works, because it does not it's practically it is not going to be of much use. Close I've showed you. Closed actually is used to check if the file is closed or not. So for example, if we have opened a file, and see, this file is right now in open position. So if I do closed, it says, sorry, dot closed, then it says false, because we have not closed the file. When we read the file here, we read the file and then we forgot to close it, so it just says that file is not closed. But if we read the file, and then if we do file dot close, okay, and then if we run this, then it is going to tell us true, which means the file is closed. So it is related to that. And detach is again used to remove the memory, remove the buffer from the file object. Again, not very important. Encoding is used to check, like I told you, whenever we have any kind of string in Python, when we are storing it, it is stored in an encoded way, and then when we are reading it, we decode it back. So there are multiple different types of encoding. One common encoding that we are using is UTF-8. And even when you are reading the file or writing the file, say for example, if I do file dot open, and if I do file dot read, here we have information about, sorry, if we do file dot write, sorry, not here, actually in the open itself here. So if you go here, you will see there is a parameter called as encoding, which is by default it is none. We use UTF encoding. Somewhere I think it should be there. Encoding is the name of the encoding used to decode or encode the file. This should be used only in text mode. Text mode is what we have been doing. I told you there are two modes, one is binary and text. Binary we will see later, but right now we are in text mode. So default encoding is platform dependent. In Mac and Windows, I think we use usually UTF-8, but any encoding supported by Python can be passed. So suppose if you are getting any error of encoding, then you can do a quick Google search and figure out there are 4 or 5 different types of encoding, and we can use those encoding. So currently, if you want to find out what is the encoding in your file, we can do file dot encoding, and you can see. So by default it gives us UTF-8. If you come here, when I was trying to save this Word file, here also you see I was getting some prompt. You see I'm doing .txt file. If I'm trying to save, you see it is telling me that saving a text as file will cause all formatting and pictures to be lost, and it is saying what type of encoding I want to save. So here manually I selected UTF-8, and there are so many other different types of encoding also which can be used. Unicode. So this Unicode TF UTF is the most standard one. So if ever you come across this encoding type of issue, try to select UTF-8. If your file is not in UTF-8, then you might get some error. In that case, you might have to try this UTF-16 or UTF-16BE. So it's like mostly it is a hit and trial. You can see which one works, and if it is properly encoded, one of these will kind of work. So that is the information that encoding is giving me. Errors is basically a way to figure out if while reading the file, if there is some kind of error, then what we are supposed to do. So again, if you come here, there is a uh, method called error. Sorry, there is a parameter called error, and if we go down and if we try to read about it, Okay, errors is an optional string that specifies how encoding errors are to be handled. So if you are having some text in which there is some different kind of encoding, or if that encoding is not working properly, then what should we do? Should we ignore it, or should we um, uh, go pass over it and read the remaining of the text, or should we throw an error? What are we supposed to do? So that is basically what errors does here. And here we have some options called strict. So strict, if you do strict, that means if you get any error, then it will raise any error. And there is something called as ignore. If you put ignore, then if any error comes, it will ignore that and it will move ahead. So again, it is not going to be, it happens only when you're trying to read some kind of corrupted file, so it's not very common. Again, we have file number, that is some kind of identifier for the file. Flush and is it, if it is connected to some network, it is for that. Mode, I already showed you: read write, append. And we are going to see read binary, etc. Name will give you the name of the file. So if you come here and do file.name, the name of the file awesomepython.txt. Then we have read. Readable basically will tell you whether the file is readable or not. So if there is any issue in the file, it will show false. So if I do readable, it is giving me here, I think it should be a function. No, sorry. The file is closed actually. So it is saying that IO operation on a closed file. So let me open the file again and say it is saying true, because the file that I'm having is readable. Similarly, you will also have a writable. Then I have write, and then we have write lines, and few other things are there. So those are not very important. This seek here is important. Seekable basically tells us whether the file will allow seeking or not. Okay, so some files may not allow not allow us to seek. In that case, seekable, if you do file.seekable, in my case it should be giving me true. Yeah, but I think in some binary file or some other kinds of files, seekable will give us false, in which case you cannot use seek. And then tell, I have shown you. And these are some of the functions that you can try out, but the common ones I have shown you. Now what is important is, initially when we started, I told you that when we read a file, especially there are two types here, text and binary, and we are still exploring the text. But while reading the text also, there are two different ways of reading. So first is using open, and second is using context manager. So till now we have been using this one, but very commonly we will not use this. And if you look at other people's code also, they usually don't use this method, they will use this method with. So we are going to use this method, and just quickly see what is the syntax. Okay, so if you want to read a file using with, using, and this is called as context manager. Now what's the benefit of using context manager is that you don't have to worry about closing the file. So it will be opened using a context, and once the work with the file is done, automatically it will be closed. You don't have to do file.close, you don't have to worry about it. So let us see the example. If I want to read the same awesome file, awesome Python text again, so I'll say with open, okay, and I will say awesome Python text, and I will say in read mode, and I will say as f or as file. Okay. Earlier what we were doing, we were saying file is equal to open awesome Python like this. Okay, this was the earlier syntax. Now we are using this with command. We are giving this file and we are reading it as file, and then we are saying file dot read. Okay, with an indentation, and I will call it info. And you'll see if I come back here and if I say print info, so I opened the file, and then I read the information in the file, then I'm printing the information in the file, and I have not closed the file. But if I come here and if I check file dot closed, okay, so sorry, you see it says true, which means the file is closed even though I did not explicitly close the file. So that is the benefit of using this method. Every time we don't have to do file dot close, because later on when we learn about exception handling and different types of branching, you will realize that sometimes it can be tricky to decide when to close the file, when to not close the file, if any error has come. Okay, so we have to be mindful about it. But if you use this context manager, then you don't have to worry about closing the file. Automatically, the moment you come out of this context with context, automatically the file will be closed. So everything that we have learned, everything applies. Only the syntax will be slightly different. Let us also try to do writing. Here I will try to do append. So actually the initial idea was to add something here. So I'm going to add something. I'm going to say write in append mode, and let me write file. Let me say file dot write, and let me take one line from here, and let me put it here, and let me say this will be point number 11, and I'm going to add the text here. It is very useful for becoming for doing data science related work. So this is the 11th benefit that I'm adding. So if I run this now, you can see uh, file.write and print.info is not needed. I've written the file, but if I go back to the awesome text Python, I should have the 11th point here that I have added. So we read a file, normal file, and then we wrote something in the file. Okay. So, and if you do want to do a write lines, that is also possible. Let me come here and let me say lines to be added. So write lines, we have to give a list of string and it will be added to the document. So I will say lines to be added, and I will say great and easy to learn, and I will add a new line here, and then I will say it is fun to do projects in Python. Okay, so two lines I'm adding here, and here instead of write I will just say write lines, and instead of a string it will expect me to pass a list, and list should have a list of strings. So I will say lines to be added, and now if I go and look at my document, let me refresh it. It says to great and easy to learn, and it is fun to do projects in Python. Two lines have been added. So I hope all of you understood about reading and writing text or strings in Python and what are the different ways to read it. I've gone in quite a little bit of detail. A lot of detail was actually a little bit extra. All this C can tell this is not needed. But what you should know is that if you are having any kind of a string, you should be able to write it in Python in any file, and you should be able to read it. Now, in this video, I have discussed about working with text data. And we'll keep it till here in this video. In the next video, we will talk about how do we deal with binary data, and how do we also deal with saving Python objects other than a string. So I'll just give you one example quickly. Say for example, if I have a list of students, let me take from some last, okay, let me just have it here. Let me have list of names, and let me have Ram, Shyam, and Radheshyam, and these are the list of three people. Now I want to save this list somewhere. Okay, if I want to save this list in a file so that I can read it later, and I want to save it as a Python list, then we will not be able to do it. Let me say, let me try it with open. I will say list of names. Let me say, or let me just say list name list. Okay, as write as file. Let me say file dot write. Then I will say list of names. So if I do this, it is going to give me a error. Why? Because this write method is actually expecting a string. It is not expecting a list. Okay, and if it is expecting a list, in that case I will do write lines. Okay, so if I do this, then definitely the content is saved. The content is saved. Let me come here, and if I say name list, the content is saved, but it is not saved as a list. So if I read it back, I will not get my list back again. So that is the problem. So if I do in a read mode, and if I do file dot read, you see what happened here. Let me save it as data, and then let me print data. You see, I got it as a string. So this arrangement of list is now lost. So the way we are working with text data, we can only store strings, but if you want to store something else, then this method is not appropriate. So in order to do this, we will have to learn about how do we serialize this in some kind of a universal object, so that a list or a dictionary or any kind of Python object stays the way it is when we save it, and then we can read it back. So either we can save it as a JSON object, or we can use a joblib or pickle libraries. So these two things we will see in the next video, but in this video we'll keep it till here, and we will also have a separate video where we will try to practice what we have learned in some real life practical examples. But in the meanwhile, go through this and try to practice it on your own using the examples I have given in this file, and in a practice video separately we'll do some small automations about writing content in file in text. But first, let us learn about how do we deal with binary information like images and some different Python objects. So I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.